Hey everyone, welcome back. And we'll start that again, right from the beginning. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm Sam Batty. Again, boom, boom. Hey everyone, welcome back to the iGaming experience. And we'll say that one more time. Geez, I can't even get through the first fucking line. Oh, come on, bro. I know, man. The first goddamn line. Well, let's do it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the iGaming experience. I'm Sam Batty, and as usual, coming to you from our beautiful Zebra Studios here in Podgorica, Montenegro. And today we are diving into a topic that comes up all the time, actually, if you're in the iGaming world or thinking of launching your own brand. So we're talking about the difference between white label and turnkey solutions. Now, these terms get thrown around a lot. And while they might sound similar, they represent two completely different approaches to running an iGaming business. So whether you're an operator, a marketer, or just curious about how these platforms work behind the scenes, you'll want to stick around for this one. We really break down a basic but critical part of the industry, which I think a lot of people come into it and they think they know what it means. But in iGaming, it's got a bit, both turnkey and white label have a somewhat different definition than they might in some other SaaS, software as a service companies. So let's just start by breaking it all down. So a white label solution is basically a plug and play setup. So a tech provider gives you a fully functioning casino and sportsbook platform, or I guess it could be maybe just a casino. So you can brand it as your own, but the provider still owns and manages all of the underlying infrastructure. So, from the data center to the code to the platform and the managed services and everything, that's all managed by the tech provider or the platform provider. The rest is up to you. So, the provider, they also handle all the boring stuff, but necessary stuff like licensing, payment processing, KYC, anti-money laundering, compliance, reporting. And sorry, by the way, if you're in those departments and I said it was boring. It's not boring. It's just, you get what I'm saying. This is more of the administrative stuff. So you as an operator with your white label setup, you just really have to focus on your brand and marketing. All right. It's a super quick way to go live, minimal overhead. And if you're with a good tech provider, then there's not a lot of headaches from the time that you agree to the contract to the time that your site goes live. Okay. Now, the difference with a turnkey solution to a white label is with a turnkey, it also gives you a pre-built platform, but you operate that under your own license. And this is one of those key distinctions that I was mentioning between iGaming and other SaaS companies. So you're coming with your own license. That means you're in control of pretty much everything, within the framework of this turnkey solution. So you've got more control over the payment providers, the compliance systems, the CRM tools, third-party integrations. You can't necessarily write your own ticket with that, but you have a lot more control. So you'll get a functional system from a provider, but you're taking on a lot more responsibility, right? So if I was to give you an analogy of this, you can think of a white label solution like you're renting a fully furnished apartment, right? You move in, add some personal touches, bang, you live there. This is now your home. A turnkey solution is more like buying a house that's already been built, but you've got to go set up everything. You've got to do the utilities, you've got to furnish it, you have to manage the maintenance, and you got to make this shell of a home yours. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit more of a real world idea of the key differences there. But so let me go into a few specific key differences, and this will give you another idea of how these these two solutions differ. So I'm going to be going over 6 key features: your time to market, licensing, ownership, customization, compliance and KYC, which I'm going to treat as one thing here, and the cost, right? Which is, how much is it actually going to take to get one of these platforms up? So start with time to market. Under a white label solution, usually pretty fast. Depending on the platform you're with, it would be a matter of weeks. Let's say a really fast one might be 2 to 4 weeks, and a slower one might be, let's say, 4 to 8 weeks to get up on a white label solution, right? They've already got the license, they have everything, they've already got the agreements with the payment providers and other third parties. So it's really just plugging in your logo, doing a little bit of customization on one of their templates, and you should be off to the races. With Turnkey, it typically takes a few months, right? So this is very much dependent on you and your team, as well as the technology provider, as to how fast you can get up. But typically, you're looking at anywhere from 2.5 to maybe even 6 months, depending on the amount of customizations and different features that you need to have, and how suitable of a provider did you select in the first place. Next key feature is licensing. So this, as I mentioned before, is kind of a key distinction within iGaming. So just remember that white label solutions, the license is provided by the technology provider as well. So remember, this fully rented apartment or fully furnished apartment, when you rent that, it's all there, right? Everything is set up. You just need to sign and move in. With the turnkey solution, you got to bring your own license, right? And we're going to have a whole separate episode specifically on licensing, and we can break down what's the difference between Malta and UKGC and Curacao and Anjouan and all these other license providers, and even get into the specific regions and what's recently come up and what's on the horizon. But that's for another episode. Next key feature that we're going to distinguish here is ownership. So when it comes to a white label solution, this might be obvious after all the things that I've said, but the technology provider provides all the infrastructure, and they own all of it, right? Or at least for your intents and purposes, it's theirs and not yours. It might be them with third party agreements and whatnot, but that really doesn't matter to you as an operator. All you know is that the tech is theirs, and you're renting a space within it, let's say. Whereas on a turnkey side, you control a lot more of the elements. So you'll have a lot more choice on which technology that you use, which third parties that you integrate onto your platform. Not completely, because again, the tech provider has like the final say on what actually goes on their platform, but it's a lot easier for you to have your own custom front end, or to add a couple of features that maybe don't necessarily require any heavy lifting by the technology provider. So it's a fairly basic way of looking at the ownership structure within these two solutions. And then related to that, like I just said, was customization. So on a white label, you've got very limited customization. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this episode. And with a turnkey solution, very flexible. So depending on your team and the resources that you have, you could have a very customized solution if you're able to produce that and have it. And then this technology provider will be hosting that for you. Next feature is compliance and KYC. I think that you're going to have an idea of how this works. You might be sensing a pattern here. White label handles your compliance and KYC. On a white label solution, the technology provider handles the compliance and KYC, whereas on a turnkey solution, you handle that, right? So it's your license. And so the compliance is up to you. The KYC, which maybe I should slow down a little bit. KYC, this is a podcast for beginners or people that don't really know the industry that well. KYC, I've said this before in other episodes, but I'll keep drilling it in. That stands for Know Your Customer. And so that's a process that you go through of having your customer upload documents, selfies, proof of liveness. Different licenses have different requirements for this, but just essentially verifying that that person is who they say they are. And that would go on you as the turnkey provider, right? If you're someone with a turnkey solution. And last feature is cost. So typically, this is a hard and fast rule. It really depends from company to company, but typically a white label solution is going to be a lot lower upfront, but then you're going to have a much higher revenue share on the other end. And in fact, we're going to dive into that very soon. A couple of episodes from now, we're going to be going over the standard commercials, what you might be expecting to see from either of these sides. But just know that with the white label, it takes a lot less money to get going. So you basically just need your setup fee. You need your fee to pay the members of your team, and for backing the gameplay. On the other side, when it comes to turnkey, it's typically a much higher setup, however, much lower long-term cost. So you're giving up a lot less of the revenue share on a turnkey than you would be on a white label. So there's a big benefit there, and aside from the control, I think that's an easy metric to look at to think, okay, which of these solutions is more attractive to me, right? So, if speed to market is your concern, you're going to go white label. It's hard to beat. If you want more control, better margins down the line, turnkey makes a lot more sense. So again, every situation is going to be unique, and in some cases, a turnkey might be better than a white label, even if you're trying to go to market faster. It really depends on a lot of factors, but who you are, what technology provider you're going to, is going to make a big difference in all of these numbers that I'm saying right now. So these are general rules of thumb, but of course you've got to go to each provider to actually get the information here. Okay, so now before we go a little bit deeper, I just want to underscore something, right? So I'll just zoom out. I've glanced over it a couple of times. But as I said, white label and turnkey, they're not unique to iGaming, right? You hear them in SaaS, you hear them in fintech, e-commerce, you hear it all over the place. But it's different in iGaming, right? And here's how, right? These aren't just product models. They're business models. And more importantly, they're legal and operational frameworks, right? This is critical. So in most industries, white label means you're rebranding someone else's tech, right? In iGaming, a white label means you're stepping under a provider's regulatory umbrella, right? You're under their license now. You're not just using their platform, right? You got their license, their banking partners, their compliance setup, right? And now turnkey in most industries is a ready-to-go system. Okay, in iGaming, it's a ready-to-go business, but one you're legally responsible for. You hold the license. You run compliance. You file the reports. You deal with the regulators. Right, so that's a big game changer as far as how you're going to operate and the personnel that you're going to need and the skills and expertise that you're going to need on your team. Right. So, how do you know which is the right one for you? As an operator, which way are you going to go? So, a little bit of a recap of what I've already said, but you can want to go white label if you want to launch fast, if you don't have a license, or you don't want to wait to get one or pay to get one, if you want to focus on marketing, not operations, and if you're testing the market, maybe running multiple brands, then this might be a good quick way to get in there and get a feel for how your brand might fare in different geos. And by the way, when I say geos, that's a short term for, I guess, geographies. Another term that people will use in place of that is target markets. But really, I'm just referring to what areas or regions are you trying to acquire players from? Now, so that's the good reasons to go white label. To go turnkey, good reasons. You already have a license. Perfect. You want more control over the tech stack, then also great, especially if you've got the resources on your team to be able to work with it. You should have a ton of iGaming experience as well. You got to have a really clear vision. You have to have the operational know-how, to make one of these brands work, because it's not as simple as just getting the tech, turning it on and saying, I'm open for business, right? There's a lot more to it. from the marketing side to the operations side, it's a giant kettle of fish that can't just be boiled down into a couple of sentences or even a couple of podcast episodes, which is why we've got this whole series. We're going to break it all down for you over time. And then I guess the last reason to go turnkey is if you're building for scale and long-term margin, right? So if you have a lot of confidence that you're going to be able to drive a lot of traffic, get a lot of new players on your site, a lot of keep your CAC. If you listen to the last episode, you'll know that if you keep your customer acquisition costs low and you're able to retain your players, then you're going to want to go with a turnkey solution in a lot of cases, right? So a little bit of a pro tip, I guess, for a startup that has real marketing firepower but no infrastructure, white label is a really great MVP play. All right, so just like get out there, give it a try. If you really understand driving traffic, then there's a good chance that you can make this a success, right? Without having a ton of iGaming operational knowledge, right? But for operators that have a long-term vision, significantly deeper pockets as well, Turnkey gives you full ownership, gives you really just more control over your own destiny. Okay, and next I'll talk to you about hybrid models and some trends that we're starting to see as well. So what we're seeing now is more modular platforms and what we're calling hybrid setups. Okay, so some providers are offering, I guess what you could call semi-white label solutions, where you can pick and choose which parts you want to handle in-house. Right, so instead of it being a full-blown, I guess going back to the apartment analogy, it's like if you could move into a fully furnished apartment, but then you could also choose, oh, you know what? I don't like that bed, change it with another bed, or I don't like that dining table, change that sort of thing. So it's a little bit more of a hybrid setup. Crypto, actually also worth mentioning, is really shaking things up as well. So it demands a lot more flexibility. A lot of operators are leaning towards turnkey models so that they can have more control over the wallets, over the KYC providers, and I guess to another extent, like some of the smart contract logic. If they're going really deeper into the on-chain aspect of crypto, which I won't digress on that. I could, because I'm a bit of a nerd for this stuff, but again, we'll save that for a dedicated episode where we just dive deep into the whole crypto aspect. I think those are kind of the key points. So I'm not going to make this episode too long. I don't need to drag on about it. I think if we're just going with white label and turnkey solutions and the main differences between them, I think you've pretty much got it here. So just, to wrap it up, white label is fast, it's easy, but you have less control. Turnkey, slower to launch, but much more control, and long-term, the margin and the benefits and the level of ownership that you have is much greater. So, I'd sum it up by saying there's no right answer for everyone. It really depends on your goals, your resources, how involved you want to be in the day-to-day grind, right? Because it is a grind. So you have to be aware of that and willing to commit and throw everything into it. So if you're thinking of launching your brand or scaling your brand, then weigh your options very carefully. This decision will set the tone for everything from licensing to profit margins to the pool of resources that you have. So definitely worth having a long think about. And in some cases, depending on your situation, it'll be really obvious. And in some cases, you're going to need to do some research or some consultation, speak to some experts. The guys here at Zebra Solutions are pretty amazing with directing operators to the right solution for them. So, hit them up, zebrasolutions.me. And if you're really stuck deciding, then hit me up. I'm always happy to talk shop. You know where to find me. You found this podcast, you know where to hit me up. You can go to sam@zebrasolutions.me or reply in the comments to wherever you found this pod, and I'll hit you back because I'm like that. So thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, tell your friends, all that stuff, notification bells, whatever it is that people do these days. And I'll catch you next time.